All right, welcome back, everyone. Kevin of Engineering Politics and I are here. We're going to be doing some conversations kind of off the cuff on the political stuff. We do have this thing. Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong. We do have something going on in November, I believe, that is somewhat important, kind of on people's minds. Presidential election. Now, who knows if we'll get the results of that election actually in November, which is something we could talk about. But we had kind of alluded at the end of our last conversation that there, were some important, election stuff, kind of contemporary things that we could talk about that also it's not separate from the issues that we've discussed previously in terms of some of the cultural trends, social trends. But, it is worth discussing in and of itself. And so, we had decided we were going to have a few conversations just kind of talking about our general thoughts on the election and kind of where things stand. Do you have anything to add to what I just said? Does that sound like an accurate description of what we're going to talk about?
Yeah, man. Funny thing, like I didn't really start thinking about this in any very, very, very strong detail until you just started talking and seeing where this is going. I mean, we're going in a pretty dangerous direction right now, and this is something we'll get to later in the podcast. But this means a lot. I hate the phrase "this is the most important election of our lifetime," because to me, the next election is always the most important election of your lifetime by definition. Like that's just the way it is. I know people like hate it because they're like everything's important. Well, it's always the next one's important because the last one wasn't very important to us now because it's already done. It's always the next one that is going to make the difference. And this one seems to be more true than most of the times. But I think this has almost little to do with the election and more to do, again, like we talked about the culture and really, what is the feeling of the people leading up to this? And really, we've seen how divided we can get before the 2016 election. We see how divided we get the day after the 2016 election, and what's going to happen now. I mean, either way this one goes, unless was that third party libertarian candidate, unless Jo Jorgensen or whatever, unless she wins,
I
which
think
I
it's
would.
Yo Jorgensen. Pretty
Yo
sure it's a
Jorgensen.
silent J.
It's like it's like yogging.
It's
Okay.
precisely like that.
Unless she would win, which would be hilarious. Like I would love that just because I would laugh so hard. But I think that would be the only option that it's not going to end in a non-legitimacy outrage. So
Yeah.
again, we'll get into it later, but it's things to think about when we're heading up to November.
Absolutely is. Yeah. I mean, the kind of, we can make some, I think when the last time we talked, there's like a few different kind of specific topics we talked about doing in different episodes, covering the election. And one of them was, forget about November 3rd. What does November 4th look like? You said, think about how divided we were the day after the election in 2016. I was mostly just hungover the day after the election in 2016. But as I came to my senses, I did see that there was a little bit of some divisions taking place. And what's funny is in my video that I made about why I'm not, I think it was either my why I'm not a Republican or why I'm not a Democrat video, I actually found some of my old Facebook posts from right before and right after. And I was saying right after the election, if we don't come together now, it's going to be really, really bad. And the words I started using were, I think it's going to be a bloodbath in 2020. Like there's going to be real deal violence in 2020 if we don't come together now. And I was saying that in 2016. And I think that unfortunately that trajectory that you just highlighted is kind of where we're at. But we'll get into that, like you said, at a different point. So kind of our outline here, we wanted to keep it, kind of tight, but just get a general sense of where each of us kind of thinks things are right now in terms of the election. Like whenever you think about the 2020 election, what are the things that you think of are like, here's where I think it kind of stands as it is for the time being? What comes to your mind?
I mean, how things stand. If we'd have done this podcast 2 weeks ago, how much different do you think it'd be than right now?
Pretty different. And if we
That's what
and
really
two
comes to
weeks from
mind.
now, it will be significantly different, or it would
Yeah,
be, you know.
yeah. I mean, in a way, I kind of hope it is, but um, hopefully in a more uplifting way. But I mean, it's a bit of a comment on just how quickly things change. Um, progressives really want to progress, and we're progressing very, very quickly right now. So I'm not sure why they're so upset. Maybe some conservatism in their lives might actually help. We need to maintain a balance between the chaos and order issue. And right now, we're not maintaining any sort of balance. It's pure chaos. And this is why we can't regulate ourselves, especially leading up to an important time where, we in this democratic republic, it's one of our most important obligations is to vote on who's going to be governing us and kind of the personalities and principles that we vote for. And it's a scary time when we're so divided. It's a combination of divided and a combination of you know how many of these people have read a history book, and the only thing we shouldn't be divided on is what ideologies not to go to,
Hmm.
and we seem to not understand that uh, as well as we thought we should. And what is it? A failure in education? Is it a failure um, in our politicians to say, hey, this has been tried before, let's not go down this direction? And now we have a pretty strong influence to pull us in the direction that we've seen in the past in places like Soviet Union, which is scary. And I know it's always a kind of a buzzword for every conservative or Republican to say, let's stay away from socialism, stay away from communism. And we were made fun of a couple of years ago, but now they're open socialists in the Democratic Party. There's people who stay away from the word communist, but in their actions, they certainly align with that ideology. There's I forgot how many days ago it was, maybe even yesterday, but what were they chanting in I don't know if it's
Oakland,
Portland, like
death to America. It
Oakland.
was
Yeah, death
Oakland.
to America. Yeah, you think that'd be coming somewhere from a war-torn country in the Middle East, not within our own borders, and that's
Yep.
that's incredible. I mean, to say that's where we're at today is something. Again, 2 weeks ago, I wouldn't have believed you. You know, um,
Really?
again, two more weeks from now, and I don't know if I'd have believed that far. Like, it is no doubt that some of these people, not the your common Democratic voter, but that
Yep.
some of these people openly they just don't like America, but they're normally smart enough not to say that out loud. Don't say the quiet part out loud has kind of been a political strategy. And some of these people who aren't in politics, I guess, have less to lose. Unfortunately, they're younger kids who haven't built a career yet, so there's really nothing to lose in their particular case. But it's really I mean, one of the biggest problems there, I guess, is the type of coverage it gets in the media. The adults in the room are the ones validating this type of stuff,
Yep.
and that's really, I think, where everything's breaking down. I had a discussion with a guy on the Facebook group I always bring up, and actually a pretty good discussion, a guy whom I normally disagree with quite a bit. And I openly said I did not like it when Trump came out and said the media is the enemy of the people. I think that was too broad. It doesn't really help anything, and it's going to just give them a really good talking point. Today, I 100% believe it.
I've
They
come around
absolutely
on that
are.
as well.
Yeah. And again, I don't remember how long ago, if it was a year or two or maybe more ago, but that is one of the most true statements I've ever heard now, and
I would
something that
actually
really needs to be
adapt
highlighted.
it. So I don't like enemy of the people. I still don't like that phrase. I would say the enemy of truth, more so. Like I think that the media are just super irresponsible and they don't think about the consequences of what they do, and they don't think about the consequences of their hyperbole. And so I don't know if I'd say they're the enemy of the people, because I think a lot of what they do, like, is just, how people can be charged with reckless endangerment or like manslaughter if they're just super careless, and they do something really careless that has, in manslaughter if you accidentally kill someone. I think that the media are not as, like, I don't see them sitting there scheming and trying to think of ways to destroy the country. I just think that they're reckless in the way that they respond to the shifting incentive structures and just their landscape. I mean, they're a business, and so I think that they've opted to forego principles and journalistic integrity uh, to remain relevant. You know, the example I keep using for the media is they're like Rose's family from the movie Titanic. That you know the mom in Titanic is saying, you know, we're just here, we're running on the good name that we have, you know, but we're broke. And so she's trying to get Rose to marry this wealthy guy, which would actually, you know, he doesn't know that they're broke, but it would re-legitimize her, you know, her family's name by marrying into this actually wealthy family, but they're just going on the recognition of their name alone. And I think that the legacy media is doing the same thing, that they're going off of, you know, a mixture of naivete, the goodwill of people, and a previously credible reputation. And they're trying, and I think that going with the Titanic metaphor, they're being legitimized by people like, by institutions like Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and Google, especially like the Google YouTube thing. Whereas, you know, you get the like CNN and NBC and MSNBC and all of those things being propped up as this legitimate news stuff. But if an alternative creator, you know, shows, you know, some image of war, they get their content banned because it violates the terms of service. But if CNN does it, they don't, even though it's the exact same kind of image. And so I think that by being propped up by Twitter and YouTube, particularly, that's the media's version of, you know, Rose trying to marry into a legitimate family, even though they're broke. I think the media is intellectually bankrupt and morally bankrupt in a lot of ways, and they're just seeking to remain legitimate despite that. But to your broader point about the, you know, whether it's the socialism and some of these, you know, the other issues of what's going on with the Democratic Party, um, whenever I think about what is, you know, where we are and what's going on right now, like what I think about is that I don't have a good sense of knowing. And this goes to kind of something we've talked about and others have highlighted as well, is just the total lack of trust in our institutions. Like there is not a poll that I trust. There is not one single institution that I trust. There's not one gatekeeper of, you know, news or information that I trust to give me something that I don't have to like sit there and double check, you know, their motives or the content that they're presenting to me. And that's a problem. Um, so, you know, when I think about, okay, where are we? I can make some guesses about where I think things are. I can make some guesses about where voters stand. But I have no way of knowing, you know, how well calibrated the inputs I'm using to kind of formulate my guesses or my theories are to actual reality, because we don't have uh, a large trustworthy media apparatus or just our institutions generally to help us calibrate those things. We don't have that right now. So whenever I think about where are we, I go, that's a good question. It seems like we're in a not good place, and I have reasons why I think that, but other than that, I'm not sure I have a good sense of what the answer to that question is, largely because of the issues with our media institutions, largely because like the fact that people are still like, and we are going to look at some polls here in a minute, which makes the statement I'm about to make really ironic, but the fact that people are still using polls as a way of trying to really understand what's happening right now is insane after 2016 to me. You know, and people like Shapiro will say, well, the polls weren't wrong generally, and all this other stuff. It's like, okay, that's fine. But, and you say that, but everyone was still wrong. So even if the polls were right, then how come everyone got it wrong if the polls were right? You know what I'm saying? So I like, there's still a big disconnect there that I can't wrap my head around.
So I think there's a good comparison with the polls to like a measure of an economy like GDP. Like it's going to give you an answer. It's going to be a decent statistical answer that's going to tell you a little bit of a story, but it's not going to tell you the whole thing. You know, if your GDP is up, your country does not mean your people are hopeful for the future. And
Yep.
the big problem we ran into, and something like Republicans like myself, conservatives like myself, did not see, we were completely blind to, was sometimes purchasing power and all these econometrics that point in a direction that says we're heading toward prosperity does not mean it provides meaning in people's lives. It does not
Hmm.
change the individual narrative. When you see a poll, a lot of the people either, it really, you really got to look into the poll and see, what type of methodology they're using to get their numbers. But again, it doesn't tell you the whole story. Just a voting output by people willing to share that information, or a targeted audience, depending on how the polling place asks the question, is not going to tell you the whole story. It's not going to tell you what the individual is feeling. And it's hard when you say it's hard to get information. To me, I'm a bit more, I guess, on the opposite side. When it comes to video or typical cable news, yes, the worst possible place to find truth is going onto CNN or Fox News. Neither of them you're not going to find much truth in. What I like is going to print, because to print, either they're going to have a whole bunch of source material and links to whatever they're talking about, and if they don't ever go on that website again, because that's not a place you're going to find truth. That's a place you're just going to find opinion. And maybe some of those places are just opinion places, but you can go to CNN.com, look at their source material, and see what the real truth is. You can actually look at the trends that they're trying to cherry pick from and see, okay, maybe this isn't exactly how they're interpreting it, but it takes a lot of work. And that's the hard part. It's not even that people aren't willing to do the work. People don't have the time to do the work. And
Hmm.
an honest press would do a bit more legwork for them. And that's what they're there for, is to bring out the honest news. They can put some personal spin on it. I have nothing against a bias news anchor. I don't really care that Chris Cuomo is out there, giving his biased opinion. I do have a problem with CNN branding him as an objective news anchor. I do have a problem
Yep.
with his brother coming on the show and them talking about his nose size rather than how many people he's effectively killed by putting people back in nursing homes. I think it's disgusting how they handled that. But as a news organization, you need to figure out that balance. So it is kind of hard to gauge where we're at today. And I know I can have my own biased opinion. If something like the Jacob Blake thing, I like I told you, and I know some people know, I grew up just north of Kenosha, Wisconsin, so I'm familiar with the area. I know people in the area. I know people in the police force, and I think I have a better sense of what's happening in Kenosha. When President Trump came there, and Governor Evers said, "Please don't come to the state of Wisconsin," they were super happy to have Trump come there. One, Kenosha, Wisconsin, I believe, might have voted for Trump. They're not going to be as liberal as Milwaukee is, because they're south of Milwaukee, but um, the people there, I think, more relieved than upset. I think you're going to see Wisconsin in the polls start to swing toward Trump. Now, what truth does that give you? I'm not sure. It really depends on what poll you're looking at. It's hard to tell. But the nice thing is from poll to poll, you can at least see trends. Like if the poll was way in Biden's favor and now it's closing up, at least you know where it's trending, but you really don't know where that the end metric's going to land, on election day. And it's really needing to figure out how to interpret some of this information. And one part I do think that education has failed at is I took an advanced, but even a basic statistics class just because I'm an engineer, so it's something I had to do. But that should be something that everyone has to do in high school. I mean, that should be up front, up there with general English, just because of how analytical our day is today. You need to know how to interpret statistical data so you actually understand what's happening, rather than have someone
Yep.
who's going to be very biased try to explain it to you. I think that's
Yep.
a big fault on the education side.
Yeah, there's a problem with statistics generally. That's a whole nother thing. I think the question I actually should have led with is, since you're drinking a Bloody Mary, is how do you make your Bloody Marys? What's your preference for Bloody Marys?
I like spicy. So what I'm doing now is, I believe it's free plug. I think it's Dr. Love's. Jimmy Love's. Really, really good Bloody Mary mix. Got chunks in it. I normally don't like consistent stuff that's going to have chunks in it when I'm trying to drink something that's liquid, but the flavor is really, really good with them. I do like a lot of spice, so I'll put, I think, Cholula's in this one. A little bit of Worcestershire sauce. I have my own Bloody Mary spice that's a bit spicy. You'll sprinkle in, and I'll either do it with vodka, which this one's with Tito's, which is my favorite vodka probably, or I'll do a Bloody Maria with tequila, which is also
Cool.
really, really good. Yeah. I don't know if that was supposed to be like a political question.
No, it
You know,
wasn't.
I
I
grab
used
it
to
and I get
bartend,
the thing, and
so I like that. I if you haven't ever tried a Bloody Mary like with cucumber vodka or um, like
jalapeno
like
vodka.
pepper vodka, yeah, those are really
Hmm.
good.
Very
I
good.
like using cucumber, like an earthier one, is really good for the vodka, and then using. I don't really use Bloody Mary mix usually, and so I'll kind of mix my own stuff in there. So like clamato, and then like you said, Worcestershire and some Tabasco, black pepper, those kinds of things. I like to splash a little bit of orange juice in there too. But anyway, no, I was just curious about that. No, it wasn't a loaded question. Although I do like loaded Bloody Marys when they put like bacon strips and stuff in there. I'm all
Oh,
about that.
we have a legendary place in Wisconsin that wow, I can't believe I forgot what it's called. They'll do one for $50. It's basically a whole pitcher and a whole deep fried chicken on top.
A
The
deep
thing
fried
is,
chicken.
yeah, a whole
Wow.
one. Like so, the thing is
Yep.
like a foot and a half tall. It's pretty good.
Nice. I was thinking of like I've been to places where they do like little cheeseburger sliders on top,
Well,
which
they
are
have the smaller one has a whole full size cheeseburger on it,
there you
and then
go.
a bunch of other
There,
stuff. So yeah,
that's good. Okay, yeah, no, that wasn't a political question. I like
I try to drink it
these kinds of
fast,
things.
or the alcohol and the Bloody Mary mix will separate, much like our country. All right.
That's right. Um, so that's why you kind of stir it up. Okay, so let's get some specifics here because we've done the thing that we tend to do, which is kind of stick in the philosophical. So in terms of where things stand right now, if you were to think about the way you perceived the DNC and the RNC, what were kind of your big takeaways from those two events?
Um, I don't really know their process in figuring out when they're doing it and how they're doing it, but I just think the RNC was fortunate enough to go after the DNC. They got to learn what to do and, more importantly, what not to do from the RNC or the DNC. DNC extremely flat. They really should have wrangled in the cats before putting them on camera because they said some really dumb things that I'm sure Biden, if he was coherent enough to understand what they were saying, would have avidly disagreed with.
Yep.
You know, taking God out of the Pledge of Allegiance in a few different clips, um, overtly going against capitalism, like calling capitalism out by name and saying we need to
Yep.
destroy it. I mean, there was a couple of really, really bad talking points in there. And the biggest thing that the media tried to take away from the RNC was them putting up all these people of color on there as they're I kept seeing the token black guy. I'm like, well, a lot of their talkers are black guys. And at what point does it not become token black guy and just become a black guy who thinks independently from what you
Yep.
think black people ought to do?
Yep.
And that actually really upset me because was it Tim Scott had an amazing speech. He did a great
Fantastic.
job. Yeah.
Tulsi, or not
Um,
Tulsi, Nikki Haley as well.
yeah, Nikki Haley. I believe there's another
Maxime,
candidate.
I can't remember what his name is. The guy, Maximo, the guy who is from
Oh
Cuba.
yeah. He was terrific. Although the best one of the night was the David Dorn's widow.
Yeah.
That one was, I think, by far the best. If you haven't seen it, go watch it and bring a box of tissues with you
It's
because
fantastic.
it touched everyone's heart, and it was just an overall good message.
Yep.
And that's really what they learned. They brought people who could tell their experiences, and you didn't really see that with the DNC. It was kind of what they saw the world. That it was their worldview of what they're going to see in the future. I mean, that's what you really see a lot of, just as a general rule. And I think that's why they always say when you're young, vote Democrat, when you're old, vote Republican. It's because you have a view of the future when you're young because you haven't lived it yet, where when you're older, you've lived it and you kind of understand, what reality is and really what the incentives and disincentives are, and who's really going to help you get to where you want to go. And so my overall view of the DNC and RNC is the RNC, in my very unbiased opinion, would have won in a landslide for rating these. But overall, Biden's speech, although they didn't really talk about him the whole time, was good relative for
Yep.
Biden. Um, a lot of the stuff was pre-scripted or pre-recorded. I think it was Michelle Obama. She recorded hers before Kamala Harris was even nominated or was called for the
Let's pause there.
running
How
mate.
telling is that? That is so telling to me. That is
Well, I
remarkable.
mean, it's scripted like a lot of their responses. When you are a party that relies on calling everything racist, from climate change to I mean, any
Math.
little thing. Yeah, right. When your prepared response is racist, I mean, what do you think you're going to get? It's
Yep.
always a prepared response because, I mean, using ideas and arguments aren't exactly the strong suit. And I don't want to make this into a they're stupid and we're smart thing, but uh, I mean, at some point you have to start making a coherent argument, and they really weren't. I mean, again,
Yep.
Biden's talk wasn't too bad. Kamala, I don't really remember hers, but
Hers
she's
was
at least
good.
got, yeah,
Hers was
I
good.
thought I remember hearing hers was good, but
Yep.
other than those two, really nothing of value from there. And the RNC was a great, really well put together and
What
had a
was your
coherent narrative.
takeaway for, kind of the next thing that we had put to talk about was the various, like the main issues of either side, but we can loop that into the DNC, RNC, just kind of our opinions on that. What did you see as the main issues that the DNC put forward as here's what we're running on? And what did you see as the main stuff that the RNC put forward as here's what we're running on?
Well, I guess I'll start with the RNC because again, their message is much more clear and coherent. Um, Going back to a bit more civility, kind of showing um, what's happening today with these cities burning, I think is an effective message visually. But as we talked about in previous discussions, it's really the overall cancel culture, calling that out for the absolute devastation it's caused in the fabric of America. I think was probably the most important theme. Is to get back to America. I mean, if we're ignoring our principles and saying free speech is not good enough to cover hate speech, and um, we have to watch what we say, and then certain people can only say things if they're of the right color, and that's not even the case. They're of the right color and of the right ideology.
Yep.
Because again, people like Tim Scott getting called out for being the token black guy when the guy was clearly speaking from the heart and has been pretty consistent his whole political career. So the RNC, going back to let's open up was a big thing. Let's get the economy back going because it was doing relatively well before everything got shut down, and let's stop this rioting and let the adults take control again rather than have the kids kind of running all these cities, which is really basically what's happening. Now, when it comes to the DNC, it was a revolt against that. The picture they're trying to paint, and the only reason they're successful at it is because the media is helping them do it,
Yep.
is painting what we see today as Trump's America, as if this was his end goal. This is what he wanted, was all of this mayhem, even though it's only happening in Democrat-run areas. And calling him out and saying one, the whole COVID thing, and he's responsible for all 180,000 deaths or so, and still praising people like Cuomo, who, again, you take out New York City and those deaths decline quite substantially. But really, they're trying to paint what we're seeing today, all the bad things, all the cities burning down, as Trump's America. And it goes hand in hand, which really didn't happen at the DNC. Is more of a strategy they're taking now by saying it's roving gangs of crazy
Yep.
right wingers that are causing all this devastation and destruction. But really, it was them setting up that narrative. It was them saying, this is what you get for voting for Trump. And as a lot of the guys like in the Daily Wire pointed out, I mean, this is a mob or a mobster coming to you, and it's like, man, the glass keeps breaking in the front of your store, because we keep throwing rocks through it.
It's a real
Man,
shame.
it really sucks. It happens if you just vote for me. If you just pay me a little bit, I can stop the man. I can protect you by making sure my thugs don't come in here and break your stuff. And really, it's an extortion case.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy, and trying to go past that. I mean, really, it would be so easy to see again if the media wasn't just a branch of the Democratic Party at this point.
Yep. Yeah, that's the well, I'll wait. I'll say my first thought. When it comes to the DNC and the RNC, what I saw, and to be honest, I thought that the DNC actually had some pretty good moments. Particularly, I saw a tweet that actually kind of embodied what one of the things that I thought, which was someone tweeted, um, "The last night of the DNC didn't convince me to vote for Joe Biden, but it did make me want to be a better dad." And so I thought that they did a good job of highlighting Biden's family. Now, of course, they're not going to talk about Hunter near as much as they'll talk about Beau for obvious reasons. But I did think that that was fairly effective. And like you said, I think that Biden's speech was pretty good. I thought that Kamala Harris's speech was good. And like I mentioned to you, whenever we were talking the other day, she has this moment, and I put this in the video that I did about Kamala Harris specifically, where she says, she's, listing all these grievances and stuff. And then she says, and here's the thing, we can do better. And I'm like, that will resonate with people, because even if people don't have a clear idea of why things are kind of effed up right now, people do have a general sense of, surely we can do better than this. And so I thought that that was actually really well delivered. She did a good job. And of course, both Michelle and Barack Obama did a good job. And part of the reason why they did a good job was because, one thing I've learned is that, Barack Obama actually did some pretty divisive stuff, and it was fairly divisive, but he's such a uniquely skilled speaker that he can say divisive things and say things that are really inflammatory in a way where if you don't really understand, then you're going to think he's saying something really great and unifying. But if you're someone who disagrees with them, you're going to go, are you kidding me? And so I thought they did a good job there. For the RNC, I'm not sure that here's what I will say. So I have to be honest, I don't think the RNC gave particularly a clearer or more substantive argument than the DNC. I just don't think they did. Now, all that to say, I think that the RNC's message seemed to be, to me, boy, things aren't as bad as these Democrats are trying to say it is. They really aren't as bad as Democrats are trying to say it is. And it seemed like they were trying to kind of repudiate a lot of the attacks that have been made on President Trump and his administration. Now, whether or not that's a good strategy or not is up for debate. But if that was the goal, I think they did a good job of doing that as a goal. I think that they did a good job of countering. So here was the deal. I don't think there was a lot of substance to the Democrat or to the DNC other than, as everyone says, orange man bad and look at all the things he's done wrong. However, I will say, I'm not sure that's unique for the convention of the party that's not holding the incumbency. Like, that has to be the argument. The argument has to be, look at how bad the last 4 years were, elect us and it'll be better. So I think, I don't think that's some type of, unique criticism of the Democrats, because that's the argument you have to make to say the status quo hasn't been good, elect us and it'll be better. Now, what I don't like, to your point about the media, is the fact that the media portrayed the RNC as apocalyptic and, having this dark overtones, when the DNC, by definition, has to make a case that the last 4 years have been very dark and very horrible, and therefore you should elect us. That's a whole other thing. So my point is that the DNC had to make a case that the last 4 years have been terrible, and here's why. And the RNC, they're basically, like you said, they went second, and their case was, no, they haven't been near as bad as what these guys said. Now, my point is, neither of those are very substantive. Neither of those really paints a picture of what we should be doing as a country. It's just you're this, and the other side saying, no, I'm not, and here's why. And so I don't really see that as being anything of substance on either side of it. The Hill has done some good job covering that fact. What I will say, and something that I mentioned to you the other day, is that what I saw as the main case, as the main foundation for both the DNC and the RNC. So the DNC was making their case based on coronavirus response, the lockdowns and those kinds of things. And it's all about coronavirus. which is fine. Okay, that's fine. I don't think their conclusions are correct necessarily, but okay, that's what they want to kind of build their platform on. And, they did have kind of what you would say is a secondary thing of Joe Biden is, build back better, right? He's civil. He's a nice guy. You can trust him. He's going to be the light as opposed to the darkness from the Trump administration. That was their argument. And the RNC, the main argument was, no, I'm not. I'm not, we're actually having a good time over here. Things are pretty good. And also, what about the rioting and the looting and the unrest in the cities? So you're talking about David Dorn's widow speaking, and so on and so forth. Now, the point that I made to you the other day was that both of those things are issues that primarily affect people that live in on the coasts and in large urban areas. So if you live in the Midwest, so like Atlanta, St. Louis, Detroit, Minneapolis, I guess now Kenosha, which I think I've heard it portrayed as a small town area, but from what you told me, it's kind of basically part of the urban sprawl between, what do you say, Minneapolis and where else? Not Minneapolis,
Milwaukee and Chicago.
Milwaukee and Chicago, yeah. Which doesn't sound like real small town America to me. But anyway, that said, both of those appeals are to people who live in large urban areas. So if you've been affected by the coronavirus lockdowns and a lot of the mask debates and people getting, Dave, like you asked me earlier about before we started recording about Dave's doing his like coming back from the grid, off the grid thing with Michael Knowles, and he talked about being yelled at going into, I think, CVS or something for not wearing a mask in the parking lot. Those are not issues that affect people that don't live in urban areas. The same way with the rioting and looting stuff, that's an issue that affects people that largely live in urban areas. And so, even though I do care about the coronavirus stuff and I do care about law and order in our cities, the stuff in Portland doesn't really affect me right now because I live in a city of, 30,000 people. And the same way that a lot of this lockdown stuff, I mean, I've said before that with the coronavirus, there's been maybe less than 5 or less times that, especially whenever things were really at the heat of it with the lockdowns, that I seriously felt like things are crazy right now. Man, there's something really serious going on. Other than that, my life was pretty normal. Day-to-day life was pretty normal. Outside of Walmart putting down lines saying, go this way whenever you go through the aisle. And of course, no one follows that. And, saying you have to wear a mask when you're coming in. Of course, no one follows that.
Come on.
I know, right? So what a shock. What a shock. And so my main takeaway from the conventions were, I think they both made a decent job or did a decent job of making their appeals. But their appeals were largely to people who live in urban areas and on the coasts. And so whenever you brought up the cancel culture thing, I think that was something that Donald Trump, and I tweeted this out and I put it on my locals and everything, that I think that he gave the single best, and of course he didn't write this, a speechwriter is the one who wrote this, but whoever wrote it was, spot on. He gave one of the single best descriptions.
He has amazing speechwriters.
Totally.
He has
totally
amazing speechwriters, really good.
Yeah. And I think Biden has amazing speechwriters too. I mean, this is why these people are in the profession they're in, because they do a good job. But he gave one of the best descriptions of cancel culture that I've ever heard very succinctly. And my point at the time, whenever I first heard it, what's funny is I heard so many people say the speech was long, his speech was long, it went very long, it was 70 minutes. It didn't feel long to me at the time, to be totally honest. Just like I didn't really get a sense that Biden's was super short until I was told afterwards that it was very short. I didn't get a sense that Trump's was super long until afterwards I was told that it was really long.
Neither did I.
But whenever he said cancel culture, like what they're trying to do is shame and silence and bully people into saying things they don't believe and to keep them from saying things that they know that are true. I thought that was an amazing description of cancel culture, but that's something that, I think has been on the back burner to these things that is largely appeals to people who live in large metropolitan areas. And so I guess my main point is that I get it from either side, but there seems to be a blind spot on both of their sides where their appeals are largely So what you'd say is maybe the primary appeal on the left is coronavirus, Trump bungled this and all this other stuff. And then also, my secondary thing is I'm a nice guy, and maybe that return to normalcy thing from the Biden camp. And I think that should be the foremost thing, because the coronavirus stuff, if you live in a rural area, you're not going to be thinking as much about the coronavirus stuff as if you live in New York City, for example. And on the stuff with the RNC, their main thing was, look at all the unrest in these blue cities. This is what the Democrats are trying to do. They are catering to all of this radical ideology. And, if you elect them, you're just going to validate all of this unrest. And then kind of the back burner thing is, and also they're responsible for this cancel culture stuff that's trying to bully and shame you into, self-censoring stuff that to be true, and to say things to be false. And I think that's a thing where, again, even if you live in a rural area, if you have kids that go to school, that's the thing that affects you. If you have if you work in a corporate environment, that affects you. And so I think that should be on the forefront, just like the left, their appeal of drawing a distinction between Joe Biden and Donald Trump should be there on the forefront. But my main takeaway from either of them is that both of them are making their appeals to people who live in large metropolitan areas. And I think that's a mistake on either side of it.
So I think you're right, but we've talked about this before, and I'm actually starting to, I think, disagree with you a bit more on this one. I think you're right that the actual disease is cancel culture, and showing these burning cities is a symptom of that disease. I do think this burning down of cities, that actually is a part of cancel culture. I think it's just
Totally.
a derivative of it. You're trying to silence people. People don't agree with you, so you're going to burn their stuff down.
I agree.
And when we first talked about it, I thought I disagreed with you more because I'm from Wisconsin, and when I see Kenosha burning down, a place that I'm very, very familiar with, and I know is not a huge, thriving, progressive city, I'm very, very, very strongly disagree with you. I think showing anyone in Wisconsin a picture of Kenosha burning is going to be much more effective than telling them the most eloquent speech on cancel culture. Sure. Even though, again, that is the disease and this is just a symptom. Now, when you're talking to people that are away from the coasts and in the Midwest or more rural areas, I don't really even think that people who don't listen to podcasts like this even have heard the term cancel culture. I don't think when they send their kids to school and on the agenda for school for this year is teaching them about racism, that they even understand. They're not teaching them about racism. They're teaching them about 1619 racism. They're teaching them revisionist history. I don't think a lot of people get that, who are not, like, I'm talking about people who maybe watch CNN a little
low
bit.
Information diet. Low information diet.
Exactly.
Person.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
So I actually do think showing them videos of rioting and burning buildings is going to be more effective than talking about cancel culture. When they're that, I think me and you, yes, I think that one thing you tweeted, that the quote you tweeted, perfectly summarizes exactly what we should be focusing on. And it's really going to get people like me and you understanding that he understands the idea. At least someone in his administration understands the actual idea. But I don't really know with the rural people if they're gonna see this cancel culture as a real thing. Because again, the problem with culture, same thing with the problem with economy. You can't feel it, you can't touch it. It's there only because people tell you it's there. And then you have people like Charles Blow who come out and say it's not a real thing. And again, it's a lot of the media running cover for it to tell you it's not a real thing. That's going to get your average person being like, I don't know what you mean by cancel culture, but I know what a burning building looks like. So I do think it might be more effective, even though it's not addressing the underlying disease. It's just addressing a symptom.
So I think, I'm not sure we disagree, because what you're saying is accurate in terms of the how effective it is to see stuff on fire. So I totally agree with you on that. I guess my thinking is anyone who works in any type of corporate environment, big or small, has been subjective to a lot of this diversity, inclusion, and equity training. And the way that it's been ratcheted up, especially over the past, what you might say is maybe, really a few years, but in this past several months, really. Anyone that watches the NBA, anyone who watched, the NFL previously, um, I think does have a general sense that, again, I go back to the polls that were, I think this one was from maybe a month or so ago, where it was somewhere around 2/3 of Americans found themselves self-censoring, um, found themselves, you know, not saying their beliefs for fear of backlash. And that's 2/3 of Americans. It was a pretty big poll. And so I think that even if so I'm not sure that I disagree with you about how this showing burning things is effective. Of course, that's effective. Visuals are very effective. Um, my point is that even if you don't live somewhere where things are burning down, again, about 2/3 of Americans censor themselves, and we're connected via social media. And we know that Facebook seems to be a largely right wing space, and so and the memes get circulated. Good, bad, or neutral. Oftentimes they're inaccurate and ridiculous, but people do have an understanding of what is taking place here from the mainstream media. There's when they see the picture, and so this is maybe where you say that they're connected, where you see it's like fiery but mostly peaceful protest from CNN. They go, that's crazy right there. Like, obviously, so they see the way things get conflated. They see the stuff going on with language. And again, unless you work for yourself, if you're in education, which is one of the largest public education, one of the largest employers in the country, if you're in any type of corporate environment, you have had some exposure to this, and you felt that pressure of, there's a part of you going, well, hold on, wait a second. I see what you're saying. Can we ask some questions here? And that part of you that says, I can't say it or else I'm going to be called a bigot or something. And so, I guess my point is that I think that you're right. That is very effective, and it is a symptom. But either way, I think people, even if they're in a rural area, they've felt it and experienced it. And the broader part is that includes those who are on the left. That includes classical liberals. That includes those who are in the center left. People like Carlin Bursinko, or Dave Rubin from a few years ago, or Bridget Fetisi, who says, hold on. You know what I'm saying? And so I think that even if you're on the center left, or on you would consider yourself maybe even firmly on the left, that cancel culture part is something that, I do believe that most people feel that there's something wrong, that there's something going on there. And if you have 2/3 of Americans who are saying, yeah, I censor myself, and the only people who say they don't is progressives. I remember there was a poll from college campuses a few years ago that the only people who didn't self-censor in the classroom were those who labeled themselves as progressives. And so even center left and left-wing people who call themselves liberals censor themselves in the classroom. So this has been going on for a long time. And so I think that idea of something is happening with what is accepted speech, and that goes to the Overton window thing we've talked about. It's people who sense there's something going on there, includes those on the right and on the left, virtually no matter where they are. And so, I'm not sure I see a big disagreement there. I just wish they would, as you said, they are connected. I wish they would maybe make that connection a little bit more and show how these things are both, one, important, and two, they are connected. And so maybe that'd be a way to bridge that gap. I don't know if does that make sense?
Yeah. And yeah, it seems like you and I probably don't disagree on this, just the small nuanced parts, but like even that poll you brought up, and I don't want to derail this conversation, but it is sort of getting into where we think the voters are right now, because we are talking with the everyday voters.
Yep.
Even that poll that says 2/3 of people self-censor, I think that would be a poll. I would find that to be very accurate on the coasts. I don't necessarily think that's for rural America. I mean, if we're talking about people who have not been touched by this, I think there's going to be a bit of a difference, and I don't know what they're predisposed to, if they're naturally more right wing, if they're going to be in a more rural area who is not touched by this. It makes sense that if you're in a very, very red area, you wouldn't be touched by it at all. And again, you might only get your information via Fox News and see that people are telling you it's there, you just never experienced it yourself, right? But I'm wondering, and I'll be interested to see some sort of poll or investigation into how many of these um, corporations, I mean, how many of these businesses in places that aren't super progressive like Portland and Seattle, if they take one of these anti-racism courses, and they're going to be pulled when they come out to say, did this actually help you, or do you think this sends a bad message? I'm wondering where that goes, and is that split going to be dependent on, you know, how most people would see these anti-racist type courses, or is it going to be split more along the moral foundations theory of where people tend to lie with their combination of personality characteristics? So basically, how open are they to this new experience to say there's racism out there that you didn't see because you're white privilege? You know, how many people are going to buy that hook, line, and sinker, and how many people are going to reject it for being like, this is heading in a space that I don't want to go? And, you know, is that just because of how bad the Ibram Kendi and or Robin DiAngelo type of anti-racism goes, or is it because people just, again, moral foundations theory, that they're going to reject this just because of the type of personality they have?
So I think that's a valid point. I suppose I'm less concerned about how the person sitting in the seminar feels about it as I am about the fact that it's even being presented in a seminar in the first place. So if you know, I forget which university or business it was that just hired Robin DiAngelo, it was like $20,000 to do whatever thing. I think it was
I was going
university.
to say it's only $20,000.
I know, right? Yeah. Anyway, words coming to my mind. So speaking of self-censorship, but you know, even if 95% of people walk out of that going, well, that was a waste of time. Okay, fine, but you still legitimized it on the higher level. And they can use that to further be legitimized as like, we've been hired, we've spoken here, here, and here. And, you know, it still is part of, you know, when we've talked about before with the hierarchies and the institutions, it still legitimizes it. And so that's what I'm way more concerned with than I am how the average person thinks about it, because the people in charge in that instance thought it was worthwhile spending money on. And so they're going to legitimize it. And what that does is it legitimizes the people like in the HR department, all these other places that really do believe it. And so they can use it to reference back to, well, remember the training we had to enforce those kinds of things within their, you know, various corporate hierarchies at a later point. And so, you know, that doesn't, it does matter if people, you know, attend the trainings and go, well, that was stupid. You know, there's a podcast called like canceled and unsubscribed or something like that. I can't remember what it is, but they said they interviewed someone who attended some of this training, and the title of that podcast was what an effing stupid way to talk about a really important issue or something like that. So even if they walk away saying that, they've still legitimized the idea, and they've further emboldened the people, again, in the HR departments and stuff, who really do subscribe to it. So, well, but that's another thing. I mean, if you have something else you want to say to that, that's fine. I do think that we should kind of transition to the DNC, RNC, and then to the media's role and how that stuff is presented. But if you have a thought on what I just said, by all means.
Yeah. No, again, it seems like we basically agree on this. We're just, I guess, interpreting in different directions. The reason I would bring it up as not only validating you bringing in and paying 20 grand to bring this person in to feed you nonsense, and that's more of a macroscopic way. In a microscopic way, I mean, the media is slowly feeding this to everyone. Like,
Yep.
it's reaching a large audience, rather, whether or not the business they work for is paying for someone else to give them that information. It's getting out to them in bits and pieces, and that's
Yep.
kind of what's scary to me. So I'm wondering how many people are buying this hook, line, and sinker, and how many people are seeing it and seeing it for what it is, and being like, oh, this is obviously something that we shouldn't be doing.
My guess is very few people are actually buying it, but the problem is, and what we talked about at the end of our last one, when we talked about the hierarchies, is if you don't believe it, that's fine. But if you don't believe it and also you don't oppose it, and you like make it seem like this is widely accepted, then that's just as much, if not more, of a problem, because it's still legitimizing, right? I mean, that's that,
Mm-hmm.
silent complicity component. And we talked about in the last one, we don't have to go retread that. But so shifting to the media, the way they have portrayed a lot of this, if you think about the way the DNC and the RNC were portrayed. So this is a lot of what I've been landing on lately, has been coming to the way, there's facts, there's what's true, there's what's, we can determine via empiricism, via, actual data, and so on and so forth. And then there's what that low information diet person sees, and what they interpret, and the way their opinions are formed. So what I saw from the media, so I took screenshots of, so I have, I think, maybe 11 different news apps, I use the term very loosely, on my phone, and I took screenshots of the updates or the notifications I got from these various news apps, NBC, Politico, Associated Press, CNN, Huffington Post, NPR, etc. And the way that they covered the DNC, which is where I think the average person is getting that low information diet person is getting their information. The way they covered the DNC, every night was very electric, and it was so exciting, and it had, whenever Obama was speaking, it was a scathing rebuke of, Donald Trump and so on. And the RNC, it was this apocalyptic dark message. CNN fact checked the RNC every night, whereas whenever they fact checked the DNC, they did at the very end, and their main point for the DNC fact checked was, well, people got a little excited and were a little emotional, but the claims they made were largely true. Never mind the fact that Joe Biden's entire campaign was launched on this fine people hoax, which he again articulated in his speech, the fine people hoax. But we're not going to fact check that because we're lying parasites. But either way, the way that these things were covered, I think that we can spend a lot of time, and this is something I see a lot of commentators, particularly in the conservative space, doing, is they'll say, well, here's what the media said, and here's the facts, and here's the facts, and here's some more facts. And my thought is, man, that would be really useful if facts were even remotely relevant to how the average person is getting their information. Facts are nowhere near where the average person is getting their information, especially that low information diet person is getting their information. And so what you have to look at is, okay, what are the facts? That's fine, and you should know what the facts are. But what you need to really look at is, how are the facts, or lack thereof, or the spin or the editorializing of those facts presented to people? And whenever I see this dark apocalyptic thing from the RNC, and how amazing and how spectacular and unifying and all this other stuff that the DNC did, the facts are not super relevant if the average person is given something that is a spin on those facts. And I can pull up some of those polls and that data to support that if you want, or you can give me your thoughts and then I'll pull it up. I don't care.
Yeah, I can give you my thoughts while you're pulling it up if you want. But
Okay.
But yeah, the interesting dilemma here is facts don't care about your feelings, but my feelings don't care about your facts. So
That's right.
you can't rely on one or the other.
You're sounding like me.
It's something called narrative, and it's the most powerful thing probably in the human condition. So it's something you have to rely on when it comes to the coverage of it. I follow this really great website. It's called returntoreason.locals.com, and this guy keeps posting all of the clips, like you're saying, of what they're saying during the fact checks. And yeah, it was amazing. How I would describe the DNC according to the media is stunning and brave, and how I describe the RNC according to the media is divisive and they're liars. So
This is correct.
That's basically what I saw.
I appreciate that plug. At the beginning of this, I was like, what I should have said was, we have another Return to Reason and engineering politics collaboration. And I didn't, and I left my part, the my locals out of it. And I'm like, that's fine. I don't care. I'm like the worst spokesman for my stuff anyway. So I appreciate you doing that.
Oh, that's you? I didn't even know it was you. What the heck?
That's right. That's right. Actually, the picture for that locals page is probably like 9 years old. So here's the what we have. So this is political polls. So the approval of the convention. So the RNC approval rating was 37%, disapprove 59%, and the DNC approval rating was 52%, disapprove 42%. So if you look at where you have, okay, so the DNC 42 disapprove and the approval of the RNC, you got about a 5% margin here. So you could say these are largely the same groups, right? Now, this is what's fascinating to me. This 37% right here that approved the DNC is absolutely staggering to me because like I said, and I put this in a tweet not that long ago, that I don't think Donald Trump is more or less divisive or hyperbolic than any of his predecessors, really. I don't perceive that from him. He's just covered like he is. And that's where you run into trouble, where it's like there is no positive coverage of Donald Trump or the things he says. So of course you're going to think that he's this massively divisive figure and he's the one stoking all this violence and stuff. And it's like, okay, where are you getting that information from? Is it from All Things Considered every morning on NPR and then the CNN, tweets that get shared or that you see on Facebook or on Twitter or something like that? Like, if that's where you're getting information, of course you're going to think that, because they do not cover. I mean, I go back to, I think that his Mount Rushmore speech for the 4th of July one is the best example, outside of maybe the Fine People hoax, of how badly the media covers him, because they will, anything positive the guy tries to do, or if he tries to be unifying, they will spin it or just ignore the positive stuff. And so that's 37%, only 37 approved the RNC versus DNC. I mean, that's a 15% difference, which is pretty fascinating here. And even this disparity here is pretty interesting to me as well. And the 52% approval rating, the DNC, I think that some people could say, well, that's, not that far off from Joe Biden's polling numbers, which, okay, fair enough. But again, where do you get this 37% where Trump is polling it somewhere between 43 and 46%? And so this is really fascinating to me. And this is about independent voters. And this here is the other part. So percentage of Americans who watched any of and then you have the DNC and the RNC. And of all Americans, you have 48% watch the RNC and 50% watch the DNC. Now, how could you have an opinion of either of those things if you didn't watch it? Well, where are you getting your information from? CNN, NBC, NPR, so on and so forth. So this is informed by this, right? This is informed by this.
And to be clear, it's not 50% of all Americans. This is 50% of the people who answered this poll watched it, right?
Correct. Yeah. So, yeah, of course, man. Yeah.
I just want to make sure everyone knows.
Which going to Joe Rogan's, his joke is polls are unreliable because, you're only getting information from the type of person that answers polls. But what I thought was interesting is here that didn't get covered. So this is from September 1st, so just yesterday, that Trump is polling plus 20 or 28% among Black voters and 41% among Hispanics. Now, Hispanics tend to have a little bit more of a conservative streak in them than Black voters. But this 28% is pretty fascinating here because, as is commonly cited and is, statistically accurate, if a Republican got 12, 13% of the Black vote, they win the election, right? Because you're getting about 90, 95% going for Democrats. So Trump's polling at 28% among Black voters as of yesterday. That's actually
been fairly consistent too among different polls.
That's the highest I've seen it. I've seen it actually. That's not true. I've seen it at 30% a little while back. But the average, I tend to see it is at about maybe somewhere between 10 and 18%. is where I tend to see it. 28% is really fascinating. And you have to wonder if that's from not from people who are watching, CNN and NBC and NPR, but who are looking around in the inner cities, because that's where you find the majority of black voters, and going, oh, everything's on fire, and my mayor's a Democrat, and they're blaming this on Donald Trump, and I have an IQ above 10, so I know that can't possibly, doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And so that's where they're seeing that. If this percentage holds out, like I said earlier, polls are pointless and stupid.
That percentage cuts in half, you'll be fine.
That's an excellent point, Kevin. If that percentage even cuts in half, he wins, right? Nationally, he wins. So anyway, so let's talk about now. First off, so that's the media stuff, and that kind of feeds into the next point about the debates and some kind of predictions we might make there. Do you have anything you want to add to that first? Any thoughts on some of these numbers for the RNC, DNC stuff, or the stuff among Black and Hispanic voters before we go on?
Yeah. I don't know as much about the RNC, DNC. Who the heck knows? Really, who's answering that, and what kind of questions they're asked, or what lens are they seeing these through? Because I did my best to watch both, or have at least streaming in the background as much as I could while I was working, so I didn't get everything, but I got the gist of it. Something I would avidly disagree with you on is Michelle and President Obama's speech. I think Michelle, her speech was the worst out of all of them. I think hers was actually transparently bad. And Obama, he's got a facade that helps him out a little bit, but both the messages I think were awful. Although I'm getting coming from a conservative side now. When it comes to the black vote,
my thought is low information diet. Person is not going to see them as transparently bad.
Yeah,
that's all I'm saying.
Well, yeah. So I'll agree with you there. So we don't have to spend another hour on it, because I think we could. But yeah, the share of the black vote has been pretty consistently high, and like no one looks at this, which is insane. And according to this poll, Biden thinks 28% of black people aren't black people, so that's pretty insane. And then against among Hispanics, it's always gonna be higher, basically because Cubans vote down the line pretty much Republican, and if they don't, they're not Cuban. But the reason they do that is because they come from where? Cuba. If you know anything about Cuban history, you're probably going to vote conservative. And it's just the facts. But yeah, it's interesting. Again, you can't always rely on polls, but even seeing the stuff again cut in half, that's pretty crazy. That's a very large share. So it's we're seeing something we haven't seen ever. I was saying a long time, but almost ever. So it'll be interesting to see how it shows up in November.
One of the reasons why I have such an issue with the polls and with with everything really, but is, so we talk about cancel culture and stuff like that. And one thing I've thought for a while is, I think I might have mentioned this with you, I can't remember, but who is more silenced, or who is more pressured to go along with the narrative than a Black conservative right now? Forget about a white, white male, straight white male, and a Christian straight white male. Oh my gosh. But imagine being a Black conservative and how much pressure there is to go along with something that you might not agree with. I mean, I imagine it has to be enormous. So we don't know how accurate these polls are. But we do know that, like you said, and I think that's an excellent observation, if this was even cut in half, Trump wins. So anyway, okay, so on to the debates, and let's just talk about that for a second, and then we can close it out there. So the debates, well, first what I'll say is, as I pulled up this Yahoo News thing, I've heard, you mentioned the Daily Wire earlier, I've heard Jeremy Boring, and I believe there's one other, who said there is no way there's going to be any debates between Trump and Biden, and they've been saying that for a while. And my thought for a while has been, you're crazy if Biden refuses to. So I think there is something to the argument that if he, for some reason, decided not to, the media would find ways to support that decision. I think that's a fair analysis. I don't think it'd be very effective, though, in that case. because it would. I don't think there's any person at this point in time who hasn't at least heard the idea that Joe Biden is declining mentally. And if he refuses to do any debates, I think that that will substantiate that claim for people, even if the media is doing their damnedest to run interference there. But my point that I've been, like I mentioned to you before we started, since about April, whenever he was the pretty obvious nominee, the presumptive nominee, as they say, is that no, they will have debates, but they will find a way to tilt it in their favor. And my point has been for a while now that they will just live fact check the debates. But before we get to that part, here's their schedule for the debate. So they are scheduled. So it looks like they are going to happen, which I think they will. And again, I can get into the ways in which I think that the media will try to mitigate any advantage Trump has here. But this is the article you shared with me, which is we have Fox News, C-SPAN, and NBC moderating the upcoming debates. So the first one is on the 29th. So that's 27 days from now. So just under 4 weeks, we have the first one of the debates. It's pretty crazy when you think about it, really, just under 4 weeks. Now, it's crazy because it feels really close, but also we live in a news cycle where we went directly from impeachment to a global pandemic lockdown, crazy stuff in about that time period, right? End of February through the middle of March, end of March. Anyway, there we go. So we have the C-SPAN town meeting in October, and then Kristen Welker on the final debate. And the first one is Chris Wallace of Fox News. So the debates will be happening, and then there'll be the Mike Pence and Kamala Harris debate that looks like it'll happen after the first debate between Biden and Trump and before the second one. So anyway, so those debates are happening. Do you have any predictions or thoughts about those before I get to my theory that has now been confirmed, it seems like, all over the place? And what you think those debates are going to be like? Let's do that. What do you think these are going to be like?
Yeah.
Let's go there first.
I think this one's harder to predict than the outcome of the actual election. I think I have no idea what these are going to look like. Are they going to look like this, me and you, on two different screens talking to each other? Is it going to look like, was it Biden and Kamala Harris talking to each other? Was it yesterday, a few days ago, where they're in two chairs 30 feet away from each other just to really push the point down that they need to be social distancing?
We're very serious.
If, a traditional debate, Trump would murder him, even with live fact checking. I don't think that would help. He would eviscerate him because of two things. One, he's there in person and kind of do the more intimidation thing. He flustered Jeb Bush. He flustered a lot of people. The only person he couldn't, and even he got to Ted Cruz, who's a very well-versed debater. So he got to him. It's easier to get to him when you're there live, but also with no crowd. A lot of people Joe Rogan brought this up. The reason he's so good is because he's a stand-up comedian, and a stand-up comedian with no crowd looks like, what's her name? Trump Jr's. That, but now Trump
Guilfoyle.
Jr. Yeah,
Guilfoyle.
Who's screaming in an empty
the best
and looks
is yet to come.
Yes. But without those two elements, if this is a Zoom meeting like the DNC, I wouldn't be surprised if Biden stuff's pre-recorded. And that's the only way you're going to be able to get them to stay awake long enough to do it. Or they're going to have to do like a soup break like every 20 minutes. But I really don't know what this looks like. If it's a live debate, again, I don't remember if we talked about before we started this recording or at the beginning, can CNN stream something that's on a Fox News debate? If they can, how many people are going to try to tune into CNN so they could see their live fact checking when they know Fox News might not do it, unless it's demanded by the Biden campaign to actually have someone there live fact checking. And again, if there's someone there live fact checking, do they interject during the debate and actually stop the candidates and point out what they're getting wrong? Or is it just a ticker on the bottom that's going to point out all the stuff they do wrong? Because if you know anything about debate, been in a debate club, watched a movie about debate, the fact checkers are supposed to be the debaters. That is what you're
Yep.
there for. You prepare for a debate to live
That's
fact
that
check
facts
because they're
part, man. You're bringing facts in,
right.
and that's not
Well,
super
there
relevant
there
here.
is there is no more compelling feeling fact, whatever you want to call it, than someone getting called out on stage in real time by the opposing debater for a fact they got wrong. You want to win a debate, you find something that they're getting wrong, you have a statistic and the source cited in your head, because you can prepare for the stuff you're going to know what the other person's talking about. If Trump doesn't know exactly what Biden's going to say, I would say more so than what Biden knows he's going to say, he's doing something wrong. And if you can live fact check in real time right there, that's how you win hearts and minds. It's a fact, but that's something that would fluster the other guy and really swing momentum in a debate. So if he could do that and freely without the need of a third party fact checker, that's how you win. But Trump is not Ted Cruz. He's not going to have this
Yeah.
library of facts in his head, so that's going to be the problem.
Well, he does
If he,
remember those things, it seems like. Now, what I'll say about those debates is, first off, like I said, it was back in April whenever I first said they will find a way. And man, I have this friend who is really smart and gets this stuff, and he is way more charitable to the mainstream media than I am. But my point has been they blame themselves. The news media, the big tech blame themselves in a lot of ways for Trump's election. And we've seen the way everything from Brett Kavanaugh to impeachment to coronavirus has been dishonestly covered. And so I look at that pattern and I go, okay, no part of me says they're going to rein it in now at 0 hour as the polls are tightening. Like they're going to go all out. And I think I was telling you before we started, the NPR has started to have way more crazy and obviously partisan headlines and stories just in the last week than you traditionally see from them. I'm not saying they're not partisan, but they generally are a little better at hiding that than their people around them like NBC and CNN and so forth. But my point is that they will find a way. So life finds a way, as Ian Malcolm says in Jurassic Park. Propaganda and narrative find a way, and so the fact checking to me is, I think there's a few ways they do this. One is the moderator is the one asking the questions, right? And so if you just ask questions that you can look back and say, every single time so-and-so has been asked this question, this is the kind of answer they gave, then you just have the fact check response ready to go, right? Like you ask the questions in a way where you know what they're going to say. And so then you have whatever spin on the statistics, as you mentioned earlier, or whatever, prepared ahead of time. So that's one way to do it. And the other way, like you said, is if they do it via Zoom or whatever. There's lots of demands that the Biden campaign can make here. And one thing that I've thought about it is, so from the New York Times, Nancy Pelosi more recently saying, well, there shouldn't be debates. There shouldn't be debates. To me, that has been their version of leading with an extreme offer they know the other side won't take. And then the offer they know they'll settle for, what they're really hoping to get is debates with fact checkers. It's their side's version of that art of the deal or whatever. Where you lead with, that's right. So you lead with something so extreme that the other side is like, no, absolutely not. And then you also are slowly for a while teasing this idea of fact checking. You have media outlets talking about like how there's so much misinformation and Russia meddling. Of course, we're going to ignore China and Iran who are meddling on behalf of Biden. That, I guess, isn't happening. I would love to see a poll of the average American who knows. Let's do a thing where you have A, B, and C, which countries are meddling on behalf of which candidate, who's going to actually even know that Iran and China are meddling. And then on the other hand, or the next point is,
well, it's racist to bring those up. Russians look like white people, so it's not.
No, that's true, and and you're right, and that is very racist, and it is what it is.
Unless they're trying to get into Harvard.
That's right. That's right. That's a whole nother, man. I had conversation about that earlier today. Okay, it doesn't matter. Anyway, but my point is that they will find a way to undermine, because people know, because as soon as Biden was the presumptive nominee, and this is why I was saying this back in April, they were saying, well, here's all the stuff and here's all the things going in his favor. And then there's other people on the other side, on the right, saying, yeah, but with the debates. And my point was, if you think that they are not going to find a way, like they're going to be so biased and so like propaganda, disinformation all this time, and then when the debates come out, they're going to go, okay, we'll let that be fair game. You're out of your fucking mind. That is the most delusional proposition I could ever fathom, that they're going to lie about Brett Kavanaugh. They're going to lie about coronavirus stuff. They're going to lie about the Mount Rushmore speech, all this other stuff, and the fine people, and so on and so forth. They're going to lie about the riots and stuff in cities. And then whenever it's time for the debates, they're going to go, yeah, hands off. Fair game, right, guys? Right. We're not going to, that's so insane to me. And so they will live fact check this. So I'm going to do a screen share here really fast, which I did have earlier. Okay. So that was the moderators one. So I just Googled fact check 2020 debates. And what we have is, I'm going to refresh that. Okay, so from 5 hours ago, we have Forbes, we have whatever pointer is. Here's how it would work if they live fact checked it, just like whenever CNN, ran. Here's what defunding the police would look like, legitimizing some, absolutely insane proposition. Anyway, and then we have NBC, we have factcheck.org, which is very reliable. And we did have one from The Hill, which seems to not be at the top here anymore. Look at this. You see this? Remember that?
Yeah, CNN, New York Times, WAPO. Yeah, The Hill is like
this is where The Hill
fourth
was.
one down.
Biden rejects. That's really crazy.
The Hill is no crazy right-wing website. But
absolutely not.
It is more in the middle than these guys.
So for those of you that don't know, so this is actually pretty interesting to do a quick sidebar on. Before we got started, Kevin and I were, preparing, pulling up these tabs and everything. And I had searched for this, and I got, these various results. And below the Forbes one, where we now see NBC 12, is where the Hill's article was about Biden calling for that. It's now gone. Now, fortunately, I'm actually going to go down. Kevin, if you're cool with this, I want to see if it's on the second page at least. PBS, AP, PolitiFact. See, I'm not seeing it, man. Here we go. This is from October 2019 from NPR. So that's fascinating. So this was the article from The Hill that had, okay, so I remember this. This is crazy to remember this. So the amount of shares on this was 12,009 whenever we first looked at it a couple hours ago, about an hour and a half ago. And now it's went up to 24,224, yet it's nowhere to be found on Google search here. So this is its own thing that I think will be worth looking into and trying to figure out why it's not there, because it was right where this is. But the point is that Biden has now called for live fact checks with Trump. So what we have here is he says, what I'd love to have is a crawler at the bottom of the screen, a fact checker as we speak. If we really wanted to do something, I think it would make a great debate if everything both of us said was instantly fact checked. Biden acknowledged the idea may not be feasible before adding that he planned to use the debates to lay out as clearly as I can what I think we have to do to bring this country back. Now, Biden can't lay out anything clearly outside of his preference for creamy peanut butter over crunchy. But either way, this is what I was saying back in April, that they were going to find a way, and they've been laying the groundwork of no debates. And, really, if you think about what has come out of the Biden campaign, it has been really just a response to the idea of no debates. And then this. So there's that leading with a lot of people are saying, don't have debates. And, I understand what they're saying because of all the lies and stuff coming out of this administration. But really, what I think I'd be okay with, I guess we could debate as long as we had live fact checks. Which of course, I think historically the fact checker is people at PolitiFact and factcheck.org. If you go back to 2010s, 2008. I remember using those when I was getting my undergrad in political science, that they were generally fairly reliable. But where they're at now, of course, is in a different place. I'm really interested in the fact that this has doubled in its amount of shares, and it's nowhere to be found on the first 2 Google pages. But that's a whole nother thing. But my point is my predictions about the debates is that because the mainstream media knows, the legacy media, I like the term legacy better than mainstream, because the legacy media knows that this is a place where Trump will shine, as you mentioned, and everyone knows. They're going to find a way to remove that advantage from him. And the way to do that is with these live fact checks. And he can memorize all the stats and everything he wants. They're still going to find a way to word those questions to direct him to, and let's say you even have a moderator that is not antagonistic towards Trump. Okay, so let's go there. I'm not saying I believe that, but let's say that's the case. That moderator is not the one who kind of came up with the questions, right? So you can still have the moderator asking questions in good faith from the moderator standpoint. And then you have the network using the crawler or people fact checking and stuff live, the questions that were asked, even if the moderator asks it in good faith. Not that I trust the NBC moderator to ask things in good faith. Although, in all fairness, I do need to check into this person's reputation to see if, maybe they're not as partisan as I think, although I highly doubt it.
Look, Kristen Welker, and I'm
Kristen
interested. I'm going to look up the Vegas odds on the over-under, probably like 30 minutes before he says she's bleeding out of her or wherever.
Oh, we're talking about with look at this. So that the shares went up 29,203 since in the very small time period that we checked it. So anyway, keep going.
Oh no, that was all I was going to bring up. But really, honestly, I would be interested into. I don't know if we can live stream it and play a drinking game every time a new fact check pops up. How wasted do you think it'd be at the end?
Absolutely hammered. So that's my point about the debates is that, I think that going back, so let's go back to the very beginning and we can kind of close it out here as when we talked about our general sense of things. My point is that there's no institutions that I trust, right? And so I have guesses, I have predictions, I have thoughts, but I have no way to calibrate those to reality from one particular source. I have to, stitch things together. And my general thought is that we have seen, and I don't know if you saw this, but Facebook updated their terms of service, and it's going to go into effect October 1st. And you can't get a clear picture of what they're changing compared to what used to be in effect. So I want to do some research on that. But we've seen since about last year in 2019 from YouTube and Twitter, and then now Facebook, where they're laying the groundwork for preventing, or I guess, for some type of censorship on their platforms for various ideas they disagree with. And so again, I go back to my point is that I don't know. So it's what, Nassim Taleb calls via negativa, which is where you do addition by subtraction, remove everything isn't applicable, and what you have left is what is applicable. And so here's what I do know is the idea that the media, the legacy media, and a lot of our gatekeepers online, primarily Twitter and Google via YouTube, people forget that YouTube is a Google company, but if what I know for certain is there's no way they're going to pump the brakes now on their attempts to undermine this president and their campaign and so forth, I can remove the idea that they won't try to find a way to do it, right? So like I said earlier, propaganda finds a way. If I know that they're going to try, and people could say, well, that's a faulty assumption to start with. I mean, that is my starting assumption. And if I'm wrong, I would love to see counter evidence, and that's fine. I'm open to that. But my starting assumption is they have legitimized things that are not true. They have platformed and elevated things that are not true and tried to suppress anything that could be positive about this administration. The idea that they would stop that at 0 hour is insane to me. So I can remove the idea that they will stop that, and what is remaining is my original premise, which is they will continue to do what they have been doing, which is to find ways to undermine. And so then the question just becomes, what are the limits? What do you think they will do? What does it look like practically? Well, I don't see any limits, especially going back to Brett Kavanaugh. I think he's a fantastic example. I don't think there's a lot of limits to the dishonesty. I think a lot of the stuff with COVID lately has also been a fantastic example of saying, yeah, I don't see a lot of limits of what they're willing to go to in the Roosevelt speech, Mount Roosevelt speech by Trump as well. So then if you accept the premise that they will continue to try and undermine, and there's not a lot of limits to that they'll go to in terms of just blatant dishonesty, well, then all you have to do is plug those into, okay, so if you take those two things as assumptions, and again, I'm open to them being wrong, but I don't see that right now. So if I take those two things as assumptions, and then all I have to do is say, okay, what are the ways in which they can specifically act out those realities in a debate? And the fact-checking component is one of them. Asking questions that will lead them to things that they could fact-check is another one, and so on and so forth. And I'm sure there's a lot of ways that I haven't yet thought of. Going back to the low information diet person, and I'll leave it here, most people, just like that poll showed, people watching the DNC and RNC, it was about 50% for the DNC and 48% for the RNC that actually watched any of those two conventions in terms of the American population. So most people get those. That low information diet gets it from clips, gets it from things that are circulated, news articles, various analysis, and so on. Maybe Trevor Noah, something like that. Facebook constantly recommends Daily Show stuff to me from Trevor Noah, same with YouTube, or Stephen Colbert gets recommended to me on YouTube as well. So if the low information diet person just gets whatever clips and blurbs, and those clips and blurbs are elevated by the people who have no limit and no scruples in terms of the interference they're willing to do, then, that's what happened with the conventions. That's what's going to happen with the debates as well. It'll be things that are sent, around by Now This and BuzzFeed and so on and so forth, that is fact checking it. I mean, CNN and MSNBC and Huffington Post and NPR and NBC, I promise you, I'm predicting it right now, will be wall to wall with all of the lies that Donald Trump does during the debates. And I'm not saying they might be right in what they call out, but there will be disproportionate attention paid to Donald Trump versus Joe Biden during those debates. So that's my prediction for those and the media's component, and why I say, if a lot of this election hinges on low information diet person is going to get misinformation just, completely cranked up to 11 for the next, 60 days or so. And so I don't think the debates are going to help Trump near as much as they would under normal circumstances. That's a lot. I appreciate you letting me ramble there. So those are my kind of final thoughts.
Yeah, man. You hit on everything when it comes to debates. It's going to be two main themes of fact checking. It's going to be Trump lied and Biden actually said. Those are the only two types of fact checks they will do. It's not going to be, they're going to have to, I think they're going to feel obligated to fact check Biden on a few things, but they're going to be small. It's like, I think it was actually NBC or it wasn't CNN. I think it was NBC or someone who's considered the more centrist person fact checked Trump today when he said the top 20 cities, the most violent cities in America, are all run by Democrats, and they fact checked him by saying, no, every city's trending upward. And it's like, okay, he fact checked him with a set of facts that didn't address what he actually said.
I'll take non sequitur for 800,
yeah.
Alex. Yeah.
And they pointed out a couple of cities run by Republicans in places that I've noticed all of them were college towns too, which I think makes sense. But get prepared for a bunch of dishonesty, and it's going to be hard. And then it's all leading toward the election where, and this is going to have to be a separate conversation because this takes an hour to unpack, is like you said, what does November 3rd look like? What does November 4th look like? And what does the week following that look like? Because both sides are building a case for illegitimacy.
Yep.
Although I would argue one side's got a bit of a better case. I actually think Trump has a better case this year than he did in 2016. I think he kind of propped up 2016, and he shouldn't have done that, and that was a bad idea. And if he'd have lost, he would have made an excuse for it, but there would have been no uprising or anything like that.
Yep.
Not like we've seen today from the left. And on November 3rd, when I believe it'll show him being the winner of the votes in person on November 3rd, but then the week following, and I forgot who brought this up, saying he very well could lose when all the mailed-in votes come in. Guess what? The right wingers might have a bit of a case here where it's like, this doesn't seem totally legitimate to me.
Yep.
And then, of course, if it goes the other way around, it doesn't matter what happens. He could win 49 states like
Reagan.
Reagan did, and it wouldn't matter. He'd be illegitimate. So
Yeah, no, that's a problem, and we will have to talk about that in terms of assessing kind of where this goes for people. And I do want to think about and try to get some conceptualization of the people who will reject it and then reject it violently on either side. You know, how many actually occupy that space? I guess I think will be an interesting conversation. So anyway, okay, so we've covered a lot here. I think this was pretty good. We're about an hour and a half. It seemed like a good place to stop for you.
yeah, seems great.
Okay. I think our next one, okay, so today is September 2nd, and so the first debate isn't until the 29th, I think we said. 28th maybe.
29th.
29th. So there'll be some stuff to talk about between now and then, particularly in terms of, for me, it goes back to, who in the world is undecided on this election and what is influencing, their decision-making process. I am really super interested in who that is, because I think it feels like a lot of people probably already have their mind made up. But that's a whole
I think
nother
there's a lot
thing.
of people who have their not mind made up. There is people who, if today, they would know exactly who to vote for, but that doesn't mean their mind's not going to change. There's a
Yep.
very large block of people who are, me. Again, I never say I'm definitely voting for Trump. I can always be persuaded if he comes out and says something like, or the biggest thing, everyone's like, could he do anything to not make you vote for him? Well, he could win this election and say he's running for a third. That would make me not vote for him because
Absolutely.
it's
Yep.
strictly unconstitutional. But I think there's a lot of people, and I think we've seen in the past week a lot of those people who are punching the ticket for Biden now going for Trump. I do think there's a
Yep.
very large population, especially in Wisconsin, who's swinging that way now.
I heard so Shapiro quoted this today. I haven't listened to all of his episodes from today. And he said that, and for some reason he glossed over this. And I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. That feels like one of the most important things you could possibly talk about. And he said it was a poll that showed that 9% of people that voted for Trump in 2016 are voting for Biden this time around. And I'm like, wait a second. 9% are going to vote the other way in an election where the first time around this guy didn't win the popular vote. That feels like the thing. It's like, wait, what about the 9%? And so you have to try and make a claim that there's going to be 9% on the other side of that. You know what I'm saying? Like, it just seems to me, I'm like, that seems like an insane. And again, I haven't listened to the whole episode. Maybe he pays more attention to it. I suspect he doesn't. But that seems like a huge, that's a huge portion of your base who voted for you. 9% is enormous. So those are the kinds of things that I want to try and look at and go, okay, well, what caused, and what I've heard people like Dave Rubin say is, if you voted for Donald Trump the first time around, I don't see a whole lot of people going for Biden. Well, if that one poll is correct, that's freaking 9% of people that are going to turn on going for Biden. It's not 1%. It's not 2%. It's 9%. So that's an enormous percentage. So, again, I at least want to look at that and what are the factors there, because that seems way more important to me than a lot of this other stuff. So we can delve into that. We can delve into some of the polls and how meaningless they are. And again, what's driving them, the certain issues. So the type of person who is not as keyed into maybe coronavirus or the stuff in the rioting and looting, for them, it's probably just, economics and maybe some of that cancel culture. Maybe I'm overvaluing the cancel culture thing, and maybe it's just economics. I don't know. That does play into the coronavirus stuff for a lot of people as well. So anyway, there's a lot to to discuss. This feels like a good place to end it. Kevin, do you have any final thoughts before we close it out?
No, I am excited. I don't know if excited is the right word, but I'm interested to see how this conversation will be different a week from now.
Seriously, man, the news cycle is, one thing I think left and right can agree on is 2020 is approximately 20 years long. It feels like, I mean, it is the news cycle. Again, I go back to, hey, remember there was an impeachment this year? And no one's even talking about it. They didn't even talk about the RNC. Like Trump forgot about it, which is astounding. Maybe that's the best case to make for, those on the left saying that he is mentally incapable because he didn't even seem to remember that they did an impeachment, which I have a whole nother thought about, where if he wins, that I think there's maybe 3 or 4 issues that they will try to immediately impeach him on. If he wins, especially if they win the Senate, that it'll be game over for him. But that's a whole other thing. Okay, so if this kind of thing you're interested in, please, first off, check out Kevin's stuff over at Engineering Politics. So engineeringpolitics.locals.com is a place where you've got a community. Kevin has been doing these masochistic book reviews of Ibram X. Kendi's How to Be an Anti-Racist, and I guess he's going to do Robin DiAngelo if he has any fortitude whatsoever left after that. By fortitude, I mean sanity. He's going to be doing that, I think, as well. He's on YouTube at Engineering Politics, on Twitter at ENG_politics. You can follow him there. Same on ThinkSpot, Engineering Politics, and he has his own website, engineeringpolitics.com, I believe. Kevin, have I left anything out in terms of where people can connect with you and your content?
No, other than Parler and some of the small third-party social media sites. But,
okay, so if you're a neo-Nazi and you want to check him out on Parler, which is,
that's
from
on
what I
Gab.
understand, yeah, Gab. I was going to say, for the media has, I've been reliably informed that Parler and Gab are where you go if you're a neo-Nazi, and there's no one on those places that are operating in good faith. So if you want to do that, you can go check him out there.
Say Gab's close.
Gab is pretty close.
Gab,
I wouldn't know.
Gab's
I stay away
gross.
from those things where I'm like,
Parler's not bad at all, but
okay.
But, yeah,
I believe that. Yeah. I mean, that's fine. I've been seeing more attention paid to this QAnon stuff, which seems completely insane to me in a lot of ways. So I'm wondering how long it takes before, QAnon becomes the new alt-right moniker, where they say, go to Parler and Gab. That's where all the QAnon people are, as opposed to the alt-right, white supremacists. So I'm wondering if those will become synonymous. Anyway, so you can check them out there. I would highly recommend that. For my end, you can go to returntoreason.locals.com. Follow me on Twitter. That's at My Mundane Mind. YouTube, Return to Reason. Again, ThinkSpot, Medium. I've got some articles there you can check out. Both Kevin and I have these communities on Locals. That'd be the first place I think either of us would direct you to, because we're building communities, people are having conversation. Super duper interesting. So I'd go check that out. And we will, I guess, continue this conversation. Like you said, we'll see what the news cycle is going to be like next week. I'm really excited to see what both President Trump and Joe Biden have to say about the inevitable alien invasion or a meteor coming towards Earth, or, whatever the next thing that 2020 has to throw at us is, because I'm sure it will be extraordinary. Would you agree?
You always say it can't get worse, but it can.
It absolutely can. Yeah. So, all right, I'm going to stop recording there, and we'll check you next time. Peace.